Captain Jake Morrison stood in the massive chamber on Zarian Prime as alien voices echoed around him. The Galactic Council had summoned humanity for what everyone knew would be their final judgment. 53 years of human membership in the Council had led to this moment, and Jake could feel the weight of his entire species resting on his shoulders. The chamber stretched higher than any human building, with thousands of alien delegates seated in curved rows that spiraled up into the darkness above. At the center sat the council speakers, representatives of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy, their eyes all focused on the small group of humans standing in the defendant's circle. Dr. Lisa Palmer adjusted her uniform and whispered to Jake about the readings she was getting from her hidden scanner. The aliens were excited about something, and their biosignatures showed they had already made their decision before the hearing even began. Senator Maria Gonzalez gripped her ceremonial staff tighter as she prepared to hear humanity's fate. Speaker This Ka rose from his throne-like chair, and his serpentine body cast long shadows across the floor. His voice carried easily through the chamber as he began listing the charges against humanity. Unauthorized terraforming of 17 worlds, aggressive expansion beyond approved boundaries, refusal to surrender military technology for inspection, and most seriously, cultural contamination of lesser species with dangerous ideas about freedom and independence. The evidence presented was overwhelming, but Jake noticed how carefully it had been selected. They showed human colonies thriving on worlds the Council had declared uninhabitable. They displayed human warships that had defended peaceful traders from pirates. They presented testimony from species who claimed humans had given them hope for a better future. Everything that made humans proud was being twisted into evidence of their guilt. Admiral Roy Carter's jaw tightened as the aliens described human military capabilities as a threat to galactic peace. The Admiral had spent decades trying to work within Council rules, but every human innovation had been met with suspicion, and every human success had been viewed as aggression. The Council wanted humanity to remain weak and dependent, but humans had never been good at following such rules. When the evidence presentation finished, Speaker This Ka announced the Council's verdict. Humanity was found guilty on all charges and would be given one chance to avoid complete destruction. They must surrender all military vessels to Council control, abandon their outer colonies and return to Earth, submit to genetic modification to reduce their aggressive tendencies, and accept permanent monitoring by Council peacekeepers. The chamber fell silent as the aliens waited for humanity's response. Jake looked at his companions and saw the same expression on every face. They had expected this, but hoping for better treatment had been foolish. The Council had never intended to let humanity remain free. Jake stepped forward and his voice carried clearly through the vast space. The translation devices ensured that every species in the chamber could understand his words. He spoke slowly and carefully because he knew these words would be remembered for generations. "We thank the Council for their generous offer," Jake said with perfect diplomatic politeness. "We have listened carefully to your concerns and considered your proposal with the seriousness it deserves." He paused and looked directly at Speaker This Ka. "We respectfully decline your generous offer of servitude." The chamber erupted in shocked sounds from dozens of different species. No defendant had ever refused the Council's mercy before. The speaker demanded order and threatened the humans with immediate military action if they did not reconsider. Dr. Palmer stood beside Jake and spoke with quiet dignity. "Humanity has always believed that freedom is worth any price. We will not trade our souls for safety." Senator Gonzalez added that humans would rather face extinction as free beings than live as slaves in a gilded cage. The Council voted unanimously to banish humanity from civilized space. They would have 30 galactic standard days to evacuate all Council territory. Any human found within Council borders after that deadline would be destroyed without warning. The galaxy's resources would be denied to them forever. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Dr. Palmer made a desperate decision. While the others created a distraction by formally requesting copies of the trial records, she slipped away and accessed the Council's restricted archives using codes she had stolen years earlier. What she found there made her blood run cold. The files revealed that this trial had been conducted 3 times before in galactic history. Each time an aggressive young species had challenged Council authority, they had been given the same choice between submission and exile. The Kithera had chosen exile 12,000 years ago and vanished completely. The Mordak had been banished 8,000 years ago and their worlds were now empty ruins. The Zalani had lasted the longest, surviving in exile for 3,000 years before finally succumbing to starvation and despair. Lisa downloaded everything she could before the archives detected her intrusion and locked her out. Security forces were already moving toward her position as she ran through the maze of corridors back to the docking bay where their ship waited. The human delegation barely escaped Zerion Prime as Council security vessels moved to intercept them. Jake piloted their ship through a dangerous asteroid field that no alien would dare attempt while Lisa uploaded her stolen data to the human fleet waiting at the system's edge. Admiral Carter received the transmission just as the Council's evacuation deadline was officially announced across all human colonies. The data revealed the truth that changed everything. The Council had not simply exiled previous species, they had actively hunted them to extinction. This was not banishment but genocide disguised as mercy. The Admiral immediately sent encrypted messages to every human ship and colony. The evacuation would proceed as demanded, but humanity would not go quietly into extinction. They had 30 days to prepare for a war that would determine whether humans joined the extinct species in the Council's history books or wrote a different ending to their story. As the New Liberty jumped to hyperspace carrying news of their fate, Jake looked back at the Council capital one last time. The aliens thought they were sending humanity to die in the darkness between stars. They had no idea that humans had always done their best work when their backs were against the wall. The long journey home was about to begin, but it would not end the way the Council expected. Humanity had been given a choice between surrender and power, and they had chosen power. Now they would have to prove they were strong enough to keep it. Captain Ben Rodriguez watched the stars streak past as his colony ship Pioneer Spirit led a convoy of refugees through the dark space between Council territory and home. 3 weeks had passed since the evacuation began, and the human fleet stretched across dozens of star systems as millions of colonists abandoned everything they had built over 50 years. The convoy Ben commanded consisted of 47 ships carrying nearly 2 million people from the Outer Rim colonies. Most were families who had never seen Earth, children born among distant stars who called places like New Harmony and Freedom's Edge their home. Now they were homeless wanderers with nothing but the clothes on their backs and hope for a future that seemed increasingly unlikely. Chief Engineer Kate Williams reported to the bridge with news that made Ben's heart sink. Their supply situation was critical and getting worse every day. The Council had seized all human assets and frozen their accounts, leaving the fleet with whatever supplies they could carry. Food synthesizers were breaking down faster than her teams could repair them, and medical supplies were running dangerously low. Dr. Alan Foster had been analyzing the pattern of attacks that had been harassing the human convoys. What he discovered was worse than simple piracy. The attackers knew exactly which ships carried medical supplies, which ones had the most vulnerable populations, and which routes the humans would take to avoid detection. Someone was feeding information to the pirates, and Foster suspected it was the Council itself. Commander Lisa Hayes led the military escort that protected the civilian ships, but her forces were stretched thin. Every human warship was outnumbered 100 to 1 by potential enemies, and they could not be everywhere at once. When the pirates attacked the medical convoy in the neutral zone, she faced an impossible choice between saving the hospital ships or protecting the colony vessels carrying thousands of children. The battle raged for 6 hours as human fighters tried to hold off 3 times their number of pirate vessels. Lisa ordered the colony ships to scatter, while her destroyers made a desperate charge against the enemy fleet. The USS Liberty and her sister ship Defiance were destroyed in the fighting, but they bought enough time for most of the medical convoy to escape. Ben received the casualty reports as his convoy emerged from hyperspace near the rendezvous point. 8,000 people had died in the attack, including 1,200 children. The pirates had shown no mercy to hospital ships or evacuation vessels, destroying everything they could catch. This was not random violence, but systematic extermination disguised as piracy. Kate Williams made a discovery that confirmed their worst fears. While repairing damaged FTL drives, her engineering teams found hidden devices that no human had installed. The components were designed to allow remote shutdown of the drives, stranding human ships wherever the Council chose to activate them. Every human vessel had been sabotaged before they left Council space. Working around the clock in secret, Kate's teams began the delicate process of removing the kill switches without triggering them. The work had to be done carefully because activating the devices would strand the entire fleet in deep space. They managed to disable the sabotage on most ships just hours before sensors detected a massive pirate fleet approaching from 3 directions, the Battle of the Void. Fields became the largest engagement in human history as 800 pirate vessels surrounded the scattered human convoys. The pirates expected easy prey but found themselves facing opponents who had nothing left to lose. Human cargo ships rammed pirate cruisers while fighters made suicide runs against enemy command vessels. Lisa Hayes coordinated the defense from her flagship, Freedom, while Ben turned his colony ship into a weapon. The Pioneer Spirit was loaded with raw materials for building new settlements, including thousands of tons of metal and explosives. Ben aimed his ship at the largest pirate vessel and activated the self-destruct just before impact, taking out their command ship and half their fleet. The humans achieved victory, but the cost was terrible. Nearly a third of their ships were destroyed, and 60,000 people died in the fighting. Among the dead was Captain Ben Rodriguez, who had sacrificed himself and his ship to save the convoy. His last transmission was heard across the fleet as he spoke calmly into his microphone while diving toward the enemy flagship. "Tell them we chose to die free rather than live as slaves," Ben said as the Pioneer Spirit exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from 100,000 miles away. His sacrifice rallied the remaining humans and broke the pirate attack, but the victory felt hollow as they counted their losses. The surviving ships continued toward human space, but their communications with home brought devastating news. Earth and the inner colonies were under quarantine by Council forces. Any human ship attempting to return would be destroyed on sight. The blockade was complete and impenetrable, defended by the most advanced fleet in galactic history. Dr. Foster realized the Council's plan was now clear. They had driven humanity from their territory while simultaneously preventing them from reaching safety at home. The humans were trapped in the void between civilizations with dwindling supplies and nowhere to go. This was not exile, but a slow death sentence carried out in the darkness of space. Commander Hayes took command of the military forces after 3 admirals had been killed in the fighting. She gathered the surviving ship captains for a conference that would determine humanity's fate. They could try to fight their way past the blockade and die gloriously in a futile attack on Earth's defenders, or they could find some other path to survival. Kate Williams surprised everyone by suggesting a third option. Her teams had been studying the star charts of the Galactic Rim, the unexplored region beyond Council space where few ships ever traveled. There were rumors of ancient ruins and forgotten worlds in that direction, places where humans might find the resources they needed to survive. The vote was close, but the decision was made. The human fleet would not return home to die or surrender to the Council. They would venture into the unknown regions of the galaxy and forge their own destiny among the stars. If they were to be exiles, they would be exiles on their own terms. As the last human ships changed course toward the Galactic Rim, Lisa Hayes sent a message to the Council fleet blockading Earth. The transmission was brief, but its meaning was clear to anyone who understood human nature. "You wanted us gone," she said. "Congratulations. You have created something far more dangerous than citizens. You have created enemies who have nothing left to lose." The long journey home had ended before it began. Now the even longer journey into the unknown started as humanity turned their backs on civilization and headed into the darkness between stars, carrying with them the burning desire for revenge against those who had driven them from their rightful place in the galaxy. Admiral Susan Clark stood on the observation deck of her flagship as the human fleet entered the abandoned star system that would become their new home. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Void Fields, and the survivors had finally found a place where they could rest and rebuild. The system contained 12 planets orbiting a stable star, with 3 worlds that could support human life after terraforming. The largest planet showed signs of ancient civilization, with massive ruins scattered across its continents. Dr. Ryan Mitchell led the archaeological team that made first contact with the mysterious structures, discovering technology that was far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. The ruins belonged to the Ancients, the legendary first civilization that had vanished from the galaxy over 1 million years ago. Captain Nicole Johnson was the youngest ship commander in the fleet at 26 years old, but she had earned her position through courage and skill during the evacuation. She led the scouting missions that explored the outer planets and discovered something remarkable. The system was not empty, as they had first believed, but home to several primitive species that had been living in the ruins for generations. The Corvin were a species of natural miners who had built their cities deep underground to hide from the dangers above. They had been abandoned by the Council centuries ago, when their world was deemed too far from civilization to be worth protecting. The Rajak were fierce warriors who lived among the surface ruins, descended from a proud species that had once challenged the Council's authority and been left to die in exile. Professor Daniel Brooks had been a political philosopher before the evacuation, but now found himself designing a new form of government for humanity's uncertain future. The old Earth-based democracy would not work for a nomadic people scattered across multiple worlds, so he proposed something radical. The Free Worlds Charter combined military efficiency with democratic ideals, creating a system that could function whether humans were settled on planets or wandering between stars. Admiral Clark began the process of turning civilian refugees into a military force capable of defending their new home. Every human above the age of 16 received combat training, while children learned engineering and technical skills that would be vital for their survival. The harsh reality of their situation meant that luxury and waste were things they could no longer afford. Dr. Mitchell's team made breakthrough discoveries in the ancient ruins that changed everything. The technology they found was not just advanced but designed to be easily understood and replicated. The ancients had left behind detailed instructions for faster-than-light travel, energy generation, and weapon systems that surpassed anything the Council possessed. It was as if they had intended for their knowledge to be found by whoever came after them. The humans began sharing their newfound knowledge with the native species they encountered, offering medical care and technology in exchange for friendship and cooperation. The Corvin taught humans how to extract rare minerals from the planet's core, while the Rajak shared their knowledge of the ancient ruins and the dangers that still lurked within them. Captain Johnson's scouts discovered that the galactic rim was home to dozens of species that had been cast out by the Council over the millennia. Some had survived by hiding in remote systems, while others had been reduced to primitive conditions after losing their technology. All of them shared one thing in common. They had been abandoned by the civilization that claimed to represent order and justice in the galaxy. The humans established New Haven as their capital city, built into the side of a mountain that contained the largest ancient ruin complex. The city combined human engineering with ancient technology to create something entirely new. Underground factories powered by ancient energy. Systems produced everything the growing population needed, while surface installations defended against any potential threats. Professor Brooks announced the formation of the Free Worlds Alliance during a ceremony attended by representatives from 23 different species. The Alliance Charter promised mutual defense, free trade, and most importantly, the right of every species to determine their own destiny without interference from self-appointed galactic authorities. Membership was voluntary, but once species joined, they became part of a family that would never abandon them. The alliance grew rapidly as word spread throughout the galactic rim that humans were offering something the Council never had: hope for a better future. Species that had hidden in caves and ruins for centuries emerged to join the growing confederation. The Valen brought their knowledge of biotechnology, while the Sekum contributed their expertise in communications and navigation. Dr. Mitchell's research revealed disturbing truths about the ancients and their fate. They had been the first species to achieve galactic dominance, but had eventually destroyed themselves through endless warfare and the pursuit of ever more powerful weapons. The ruins contained warnings about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of cooperation between different species. Admiral Clark used the ancient technology to build a fleet that could challenge the Council's military supremacy. Human ships augmented with ancient systems could travel faster, hit harder, and survive damage that would destroy traditional vessels. The first prototype warship, christened the New Liberty in honor of their lost homeland, successfully tested weapon systems that could crack a planet's crust with a single shot. A year after establishing New Haven, the humans faced their first real test when a Council exploration fleet discovered their hidden sanctuary. The fleet commander demanded immediate surrender and evacuation, claiming that humans were illegally occupying Council territory despite the fact that the system had been Abandoned for millennia, Captain Johnson led the defense of New Haven while Professor Brooks made a galaxy-wide broadcast that would change the course of history. Standing before cameras that transmitted his words across thousands of star systems, he announced the formation of the Free Worlds Alliance and humanity's role as protector of the galaxy's forgotten peoples. "The Council speaks of order and civilization," Brooks said as his words reached oppressed species across the galaxy. But what civilization abandons its children to die in darkness? What order is built on the suffering of those too weak to resist? Today we offer an alternative. Join us not as subjects but as equals. Together we will build something better than empire. We will build a family. The message sparked rebellions across Council space as species that had been oppressed for generations saw that resistance was possible. The Council fleet that had come to destroy New Haven found themselves facing not just human ships but vessels from a dozen different Alliance species, all fighting together against their common enemy. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Council fleet and a clear message broadcast across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the primitive species that had been exiled in disgrace. They had become something new and dangerous, the leaders of a growing alliance that threatened everything the Council had built. As Admiral Clark watched the wreckage of enemy ships drift past her view screen, she knew that the real war was just beginning. The Council would not tolerate the existence of a free alliance on their borders, and humanity had just declared themselves the protectors of every species that refused to bow to galactic authority. The age of hiding was over. The age of fighting back had begun. General Paul Anderson stood in the war room of New Haven's command center as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. 3 years had passed since the formation of the Free Worlds Alliance, and humanity had transformed from desperate refugees into the leaders of a military force that now rivaled the Galactic Council itself.
The Alliance included 67 member species and
controlled over 200 star systems along the Galactic Rim. The holographic display showed the current tactical situation as Alliance forces prepared for Operation Starbreak, the largest military campaign in human history. Paul had designed the operation to strike simultaneously at 17 key Council installations, crippling their ability to project power into the outer regions while demonstrating that the Alliance could reach anywhere in the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Kim worked tirelessly in the diplomatic sector, attempting to find peaceful solutions even as both sides prepared for total war. She had managed to establish secret communication channels with moderate Council members who were beginning to question their government's policies. Several species within Council space were privately expressing support for Alliance ideals, though none had yet been brave enough to openly rebel. Captain Tony Rodriguez commanded the Alliance's first true capital ship, the massive dreadnought Freedom's Call that his father Ben would have been proud to see. The ship combined human engineering with ancient technology and weapon systems from a dozen Alliance species, creating a vessel that could stand against any Council battleship. Tony had inherited his father's courage and tactical brilliance, along with his willingness to sacrifice everything for the cause of freedom. Dr. Emma Parker led the research teams that continued to unlock the secrets of ancient technology, making discoveries that revolutionized Alliance capabilities on an almost daily basis. Her latest breakthrough involved perfecting the ancient FTL drive systems, giving Alliance ships travel speeds that were 3 times faster than anything the Council possessed. This technological advantage allowed Alliance forces to strike anywhere without warning and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. The first phase of Operation Starbreak began with coordinated attacks on Council supply bases throughout the Middle Rim. Alliance strike teams, materialized out of hyperspace, destroyed their targets with devastating efficiency, and vanished again before local defenders could respond. Within 72 hours, the Council had lost 40% of their strategic reserves and their supply lines were in chaos. General Anderson watched the tactical displays with satisfaction as reports of successful missions came in from every sector. The Council had grown complacent during their millennia of dominance, believing that no force in the galaxy could challenge their supremacy. They were learning the hard way that desperation and determination could overcome even the most advanced technology when combined with superior tactics and strategy. The second phase targeted Council communication, networks, and intelligence facilities. Alliance cyber warfare specialists many of them former council citizens who had defected to the cause of freedom, penetrated secure networks and planted viruses that would remain dormant until activated. When the time came, they would cripple council coordination and leave their forces fighting blind across dozens of star systems. Captain Rodriguez led the assault on Kepler Station, the council's primary intelligence-gathering facility in the Outer Rim. The station was defended by an entire fleet, but the Alliance had learned to use the council's own tactics against them. While Rodriguez's dreadnought engaged the main fleet in a direct assault, cloaked Alliance ships slipped past the defenders and infiltrated the station itself. The battle for Kepler Station lasted 18 hours and showcased the tactical innovations that made the Alliance so dangerous. Human Marines fought alongside Rajak warriors and Corvin engineers in the station's corridors, while Valen biotechnology specialists disabled the facility's computer systems. The station fell with minimal Alliance casualties, and its intelligence files revealed the locations of dozens of secret council installations. Ambassador Kim received an unexpected communication from Speaker Thiska himself, the same alien who had pronounced humanity's exile years earlier. The speaker offered to meet for peace negotiations, claiming that moderate elements within the council were willing to discuss a settlement that would end the growing conflict before it escalated further. The peace conference was held on the neutral world of Sigma Draconis, but it quickly became clear that the council's idea of negotiation involved demanding Alliance surrender in exchange for promises they had no intention of keeping. Speaker Thiska offered to allow Alliance species to return to council space as junior members with limited rights, essentially asking them to trade their freedom for the privilege of serving their former oppressors. Sarah Kim's response was delivered with diplomatic politeness that barely concealed her anger. "The Alliance was born from the ashes of your betrayal," she said. "We have built something better than your empire of fear and oppression. We will never again bow to those who believe that might makes right." The peace talks collapsed within hours, making war inevitable. Dr. Parker's research teams achieved their greatest breakthrough just as the Council began mobilizing for total war. They successfully reverse-engineered the ancient gravitational manipulation technology, creating weapons that could destabilize star systems and defenses that could deflect any known attack. The technology came with warnings about its destructive potential, but the Alliance now possessed the power to match the Council's most devastating weapons. The Council's response exceeded even the Alliance's worst expectations. A massive fleet of over 10,000 ships began advancing toward Alliance territory, with orders to destroy every human settlement and execute all Alliance leaders as traitors to galactic civilization. The fleet included the Council's most powerful, dreadnoughts and planet-killer weapons that had not been deployed in over 1,000 years. General Anderson realized that conventional tactics would not be enough to stop such an overwhelming force. The Alliance fleet numbered fewer than 3,000 ships and could not match the Council's firepower in a direct engagement. Victory would require using every advantage they possessed, including tactics that pushed the boundaries of acceptable warfare. Operation Starbreak entered its final phase as Alliance forces launched preemptive strikes against Council staging areas. Captain Rodriguez led a desperate raid deep into Council space, targeting the fuel depots and supply ships that the enemy fleet would need for their advance. The mission succeeded, but at a terrible cost. Rodriguez's ship was destroyed in the fighting, making him another hero who died for the cause of freedom. The Great War had begun in earnest as both sides committed their full resources to a conflict that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The Council possessed superior numbers and industrial capacity, but the Alliance had advantages in technology, mobility, and most importantly, the desperate courage of people fighting for their survival. As news of Tony Rodriguez's death reached his command staff, General Anderson made a promise that would echo through Alliance space. "They think they can intimidate us with superior numbers," he said, as he stood before the Alliance War Council. "They believe that fear will make us surrender as their other enemies have done. They are about to learn the difference between conquest and liberation." The stage was set for the final confrontation between two incompatible visions of galactic order. The Council represented the ancient way of rule through fear and oppression, while the Alliance offered a new path based on cooperation and mutual respect. Only one vision could survive the coming war, and both sides were prepared to pay any price for victory. Fleet Admiral Jennifer Walsh stood on the bridge of her flagship as the final battle for galactic freedom began, in the ruins of Zarian Prime. 2 years of total war had transformed the galaxy into a battlefield where entire star systems changed hands weekly, and billions of lives hung in the balance. The Alliance had advanced from the galactic rim to the very heart of Council space, but victory had come at a price that threatened to destroy everything they had fought to protect. The Great War had raged across 1,000 worlds as Alliance. Forces liberated oppressed species while Council fleets tried desperately to maintain their crumbling empire. What had begun as a struggle for human survival had evolved into a galactic revolution that would reshape civilization forever. The question now was whether the Alliance would have the wisdom to use their power responsibly or repeat the mistakes of every empire that had come before them. President Marcus Johnson governed the Alliance from New Haven while trying to balance the demands of 67 different species, each with their own ideas about justice and revenge. The Alliance had grown beyond anything the founders had imagined, but success brought new challenges that tested every principle they claimed to defend. Some member species wanted to enslave their former Council oppressors, while others demanded the complete destruction of all Council worlds. Captain Lisa Torres led the Alliance Special Operations Forces that had been conducting covert missions deep in Council territory for over a year. Her teams had discovered something that chilled the blood of every Alliance leader: the Council's final contingency plan. If they could not defeat the Alliance militarily, they would trigger a galactic catastrophe that would reset civilization and eliminate both sides in a mutual destruction scenario. Dr. Michael Chen served as the Alliance's chief science advisor and ethics counselor, a role that became increasingly important as the war escalated. His research into ancient history had revealed disturbing parallels between the current conflict and the wars that had destroyed the galaxy's first civilization. The ancients had possessed the same advanced technology and noble intentions, but their quest for perfect order had ultimately led to their own extinction. The Council's doomsday weapon was hidden in the galactic core, a massive device that could destabilize the central black hole and send destructive energy waves throughout the galaxy. The weapon would not discriminate between Council worlds and Alliance territory. It would sterilize every inhabited system within 50,000 light-years, effectively ending all intelligent life in known space. Admiral Walsh faced the most difficult decision in human history as Alliance forces surrounded the last Council strongholds. She possessed ancient superweapons that could end the war instantly by destroying entire star systems. But using such power would make the Alliance no better than the tyrants they had fought to overthrow. The moral weight of wielding such destructive force threatened to corrupt even the most principled leaders. Captain Torres infiltrated the Council's final stronghold on Zarian Prime with a mixed team of Alliance operatives representing 12 different species. Their mission was to capture the Council leadership alive and prevent the activation of the Galactic Doomsday device. But they had to move carefully through a city defended by fanatics who preferred mutual destruction to accepting defeat. The battle for Zarian Prime lasted 6 days as Alliance Marines fought through the massive city that had been the center of galactic government for over 10,000 years. The Council's elite guard fought with desperate courage, knowing that surrender meant the end of their species' dominance. Every building became a fortress and every street corner became a battleground in the most brutal urban warfare the galaxy had ever seen. President Johnson received an unexpected communication from the surviving Council leaders as Alliance forces reached the government complex. Speaker Thiska, now old and broken by the weight of defeat, offered humanity the ultimate prize: complete control of the galaxy. The Council would surrender unconditionally if humans would accept the role of galactic overlords and continue the system of species-based hierarchy that had existed for millennia. The offer was tempting to many Alliance leaders who remembered the humiliation of humanity's exile and wanted revenge against those who had condemned their species to death. Taking control of the galactic government would ensure that humans could never again be threatened by alien powers, but it would also mean abandoning every principle that had made the Alliance worth fighting for. Dr. Chen presented his research to the Alliance Council, showing how every galactic empire in history had eventually collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. The ancients had tried to create perfect order through force and had destroyed themselves in the process. The Council had maintained power through fear and oppression for 10,000 years, but their system had ultimately bred the very rebellion that brought them down. Admiral Walsh made her choice as Alliance forces prepared for the final assault on the Council bunkers. Rather than using the ancient superweapons to vaporize her enemies, she ordered precision strikes that would disable their defenses without causing unnecessary casualties. The Alliance would win through superior strategy and courage rather than relying on weapons of mass destruction. Captain Torres reached the Council's command center just as Speaker Thiska prepared to activate the Doomsday device. The final confrontation took place in the same chamber where humanity had been sentenced to exile 5 years earlier, but now the positions were reversed. Torres had the power to execute summary justice on behalf of every species the Council had oppressed, but she chose a different path. The Speaker was taken alive along with the surviving Council leadership, preventing the activation of the galactic weapon and saving billions of lives throughout the galaxy. The war was over, but the peace that followed would determine whether the Alliance could build something better than the empire they had destroyed. President Johnson addressed both the Alliance Council and the defeated Council leaders in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. The moment had come to decide what kind of civilization would emerge from the ashes of the old order. Johnson rejected the offer of galactic dominion and instead proposed something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly democratic government, where every species had an equal voice regardless of their military power or technological advancement. The new Galaxy Compact established the principles that would guide the post-war civilization. No species would rule over others, no government would claim authority it had not been granted by the consent of the governed, and no empire would be allowed to suppress the rights of weaker peoples. The Compact created institutions designed to prevent the concentration of power that had corrupted previous galactic governments. The signing ceremony took place on Earth, humanity's homeworld, that had been liberated after 5 years of Council occupation. Representatives from over 200 species gathered to witness the birth of a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than domination. The document they signed would serve as the foundation for a civilization that valued freedom above security and justice above order. Admiral Walsh retired from military service and returned to New Haven, where she spent her remaining years writing memoirs that would inspire future generations. Captain Torres became the first human to serve as Director of Galactic Security, tasked with preventing the rise of new tyrannies. Dr. Chen established universities throughout the galaxy where young beings could learn about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of moral courage. President Johnson served 2 terms as the first president of the Galactic Federation before returning to his philosophical studies. His final speech summarized the lesson that humanity had learned through their long journey from exile to leadership. Power without wisdom is destruction, but wisdom without power is meaningless. The greatest strength lies not in the ability to destroy our enemies, but in the wisdom to turn them into friends. The galaxy was forever changed by humanity's choice to reject domination in favor of cooperation. The species that had been banished from civilization for refusing to surrender had ultimately chosen to use their power to ensure that no other species would ever face the same terrible choice. They had proven that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from conquering your enemies, but from rising above the desire for revenge and building something better for future generations.